Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm good, Marcus. Well, we're going to have a chat about hopefully some interesting topics or answers to questions that Anil Prasad, who runs, as far as I know, the most rich website of interviews of this kind of music that we do, including jazz, progressive rock, progressive jazz, all that kind of whole genre area of music. Yeah. It's an amazing resource, and he is somebody with a lot of insight into this sort of music. So he came up with some interesting questions for us to discuss.
The website is Interviews, right?
It's interviews.org. Interviews. So the first question is, what's the one essential thing for the act of improvisation?
Essential courage, maybe. Courage to just do.
Yeah.
Just do anything.
Yeah.
And it's really anything. I know, like some people that I discuss things with, they don't like doing anything. It has to be something.
Yeah.
But I think it's really anything. You start with anything.
Yeah. And I would say also, along with that, a kind of not censoring.
Yeah.
Not censoring yourself and not, I don't know, for me anyway, it's important that it's very much in the moment and that I'm not really thinking. I'll make decisions, but I'm not thinking about stuff, and I'm trying to get myself out of the picture in a way.
And I mean, censoring I think is happening automatically, just physically.
Yeah.
Like our bodies are only capable of doing.
Yeah. There's limitations. Yes.
Yes, and that limitation is always there. And
and
I think like we should at least attempt not to censor even more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's an interesting topic in itself. I think just that, because for me there's always this balance between, if I really let my imagination go, I just start hearing all kinds of things which I couldn't possibly play.
Yeah.
But if I rein it in too much, then I'll just end up repeating myself. So it's just finding that area that's near the edge where the interesting stuff happens, but not going too far.
Yeah.
Because then I just...
Or like the way that I see it, like if your imagination is greater than your abilities, then you can still kind of gesturally try to get there. So it doesn't have to have the like the fine detail may be completely unplanned, but like gesturally you can like go wow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. You can make a stab at that kind of gesture. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Like for me, like the courage to do something, anything, to be free. Obviously, like even maybe more basic is, in the end, is listening.
Yeah.
Like even if you're improvising just alone.
So much the center of it, isn't it? Listening. Yeah.
Just to be able to listen to what is happening in the room, and that is kind of like. I think one of the problems, or one of the patterns that I see in many people, not just musicians, is that they do listen, but they listen internally. So they listen to themselves on the inside. But I think what really counts in the end is that you listen to what you project. So that means that your hearing has to be focused on the room, on the outside part. And that's what you pick up on, and that's what you react to, the room, and not what is kind of like what you believe you're hearing or what you believe you're saying. And it very much applies to talking also.
Yeah.
Like, and it's something that I've using this, or it's an exercise I give to my students to just tell them, okay, so next time you're talking with somebody, try to listen to what you're saying from the outside. So imagine words leaving your mouth, and they're in the room, and then they can kind of return to your ears and listen to what you're saying. And it really leads to, coming back to like improvisation, it really gives you that in a way that realness, like having the sound actually travels.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to that. I think the way I would explain it for me is I'm almost like I'm a listener.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me is almost listening, almost not watching exactly, but listening, almost like a watcher that's listening to the overall thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that makes the decisions about what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And it's always about, for me, what does the music kind of demand to happen? What does the music feel like should happen? And then I make a quick decision about what direction to take. So it is, I totally agree. It's about hearing the whole thing as a whole. You're just one part of this collective
exactly.
sound.
And also, like, just to avoid kind of misunderstanding what I mean when I say listening, it doesn't necessarily have to be active or conscious even. It's something that you just do. Like, so if somebody asks you after the fact, okay, what did you play? Maybe you can't even give an answer, or you can't even say I liked it, I didn't like it, or whatever. It's just kind of like in that moment you're just opening yourself up to let your unconscious in a way guide you, because there's much more processing power there in the unconscious than there is in the conscious. I find.
I totally agree. Ultimately, it is an unconscious thing, isn't it? And in some ways, for me, it's a matter of keeping my conscious mind kind of out of the way to let the conscious, or whatever it is, I mean, it's the unconscious mind, but it's, I mean, metaphorically, I think about it as of trying to make myself a sort of like a conduit for the music to kind of come through, and that seems to help me get into the right frame of mind. And if my mind, my ego kind of gets involved, then automatically I'm out of the music, and I'm out of the zone. So it's a matter of kind of keeping that in its own room, and then just becoming in the moment.
But it can also be interesting to sometimes get thrown out and then you come back in, you know?
Sometimes that can be a good thing. What conditions are required for you to feel truly free during the act of creativity? I mean, I would say, I'm not sure if you ever are truly free. It depends what you mean by that, but
I think it's an illusion, and the freedom. It's not the freedom that defines who you are or what you do, or it doesn't define your art. It's the restrictions, it's the limitations, it's who you are that makes you who you are. There's, like freedom is, it's like it's the situations in which you're challenged, or like I guess you try to get very creative when you're in prison, like trying to get out of prison. It's not the Sunday morning at home eating breakfast. Right. And that's why freedom doesn't really matter that much in a creative from a creative perspective to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is kind of an illusion, but maybe. We could talk about it from the point of view of...
But I have an idea.
Yeah?
I guess like the freedom is just like the respect for each other.
Yeah.
Really? Like so that you don't feel restricted by the presence of another person. That's maybe like kind of the freedom that I feel when I play with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you don't judge me.
Yeah.
I don't judge you, and that's when things can be free. Maybe that's that
definitely allows a degree of freedom, and I think maybe also extending that to also not judging yourself when you're actually. I mean, you might judge yourself later when you listen back to it, but at the moment you're doing it to keep that judgment out of it, because that just is that's probably going to get in the way. Well, for me, it will. It doesn't mean that you don't make decisions about what you think is going to sound right, but at the same time, thinking about it from a critical aspect when you're playing to me is just like, that's a recipe for disaster. And so that immediately restricts your kind of freedom, I find.
I mean, a good thing to talk about in this context may be Oculus, this idea I had for these collective improvisations where there's like a grid of pitches that you have to follow. So there's like hardly any freedom in which notes you're playing, which pitches you're playing, but you choose which direction you take in the grid. And it's kind of like really interesting what kind of results that gave us. Right?
It was interesting, and I found that very interesting because it's like you were saying a minute ago, it's a restriction that forces you to do something interesting, and it's those restrictions that are the key in many ways, or some kind of structure, like complete freedom. If you say you just play anything, that can still work really well. I mean, the stuff I do with Kevin Casting, for example, we have absolutely nothing planned, it's completely free, but we're so different in how we approach the instrument that adds its own restriction, if you see what I mean, in a way. Or like what we did with the Stonehouse or Lighthouse, we had these ideas that we came up with, which we often didn't actually use, but they were ideas for structuring or restricting what we did without actually having music written down. But nonetheless, it created a form, something you needed to kind of keep in mind and something you needed to follow. And I find you need something there.
Agreement, right? Like
an agreement, which in a sense is a restriction on freedom. And without any restriction there, I find it becomes, well, it can work. It can work, especially with ambient music. I think sometimes complete freedom can, I mean, without any structure at all, can work really, really well. But
I mean, my composition work nowadays is really like the opposite of freedom. Like I'm trying to go beyond patterns and ideas that I would come up with myself. Let's say I'm trying to make the machine create something that I wouldn't be able to even dream of. And the funny thing is that ultimately everything kind of comes down to the artist being the factor that makes decisions along the way and that has the final say. Right. So and I guess it's kind of the same in any creative process. Doesn't matter if it's like you write music down, you improvise music, or you play over chord changes. Like there's always this. It's like a back and forth between. I don't know, instant creation and questioning and editing and censoring is the word you used before.
When in a composing sense, I totally agree. When improvising, it's a little different for me, but in terms of the fact that I don't think of it as censoring so much as just deciding. But with the composing, yes, it very much is a matter of censoring, deciding, but also, although I approach composing like really differently from you, there's a lot in common in the sense that, well, first of all, I set restrictions for myself when I'm composing quite a lot of the time. I'll say, although maybe my restrictions are a little more traditional, I'll do something like I can only use 3 notes for each chord, and I have to make the whole thing just with that. Or I have to have one of the voices in the chords has to move chromatically during the entire piece, or something like that. I don't always do that. I often don't do that, but I sometimes find that is essential in terms of making something happen for me. And it doesn't mean I'll stick to that. I mean, I'll go so far and sometimes think, okay, I'm going to have to break the rule to make it work. But it's something that is sometimes really important for me and will send me off in a different direction that I would have gone on. And also, I think the other thing I would say in common is that the way I compose is I start with I already kind of know what I'm trying to render. I think it as rendering, composing. So I'll have a feeling, a story, an emotional story, a set of atmospheres or whatever it is that will just come to from I don't know where, and then I have to render that somehow in notes. And so, in a sense, it's
interesting. That's where there's the big difference, because I don't think I ever had that in my whole life. That this clear idea of what the rendered thing is going to be like. For me, it seems like there's this intermediate step where I'm rendering the machine first, that then renders the work. And it's so for some reason, but it kind of fits with my. For example, I have a hard time having actual images in my head, like making, even creating the color red in my head is super difficult for me. My brain doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's maybe also why I don't even believe that I have anything inside that I can simply kind of project or render out, right? And it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's equally kind of built in the other way. These things just they happen to me, and they're very strong, and I have to do something with them. Otherwise, I would not fare well. I mean, they're they would be. I've had periods in the past in my life where these things would be too strong, and I ended up really struggling with it until I found a way to kind of do something with it and make it into something, and somehow that kind of realizing it in sound somehow works. It helps it find a place, and therefore it doesn't trouble me. It doesn't stay within. If I have nowhere to let it out, it will just build up inside, and I'll end up in a bad place. So I think it was almost a necessity for me to find a way to do that. So it's
interesting. So I could say, or one could say, that I don't even have a vision, because I literally don't have a vision of what I'm trying to make.
But you make that as you go along, though, don't you? You create something, you sculpt something out of the material that you've generated.
Yes.
And you're making all those choices, and so you are doing it, but the other way around. You're making it happen. From
and kind of things start making sense after the fact.
Yeah.
Like not before. Now, working with Devin Townsend, for example, the way that I understand his process at the moment, I may be wrong, is like he has this vision, and he knows exactly how that plays out in the real world, like what the parts should be. Like he hears everything like in utmost detail, and that's something that I find so fascinating. Like this musical imagination, where I think I would say my imagination. Okay, I do have imagination, but it's not necessarily musical in the first place. It's something else. I don't know.
I think you do. I think you're one of the most imaginative musicians I've encountered. You just come at it from a different angle, but the end result is incredibly imaginative.
But I just never know what is going to come out. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. But it still comes from you. So it is.
Of course.
It's just different, but nonetheless, it's just another way of approaching the same thing, I think.
So when this music that you've written for, was that cembalo? Was that cembalo music?
Oh, with the harpsichord?
Oh, harpsichord.
Yes, I've written lots of different things for string quartets and
but that comes
piano
to mind now as something really kind of specifically restricted, let's say, with that sound.
Yeah, it is, and it was really interesting to write. I wrote a bunch of pieces for harpsichord, and then which were just to be performed, and harpsichord and other instruments too, because I heard the harpsichord as like a giant guitar, because it kind of is. The strings are plucked, and it could do things with the string sound that sounded to me quite close to a guitar, but that a guitar could never possibly do.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me interested in composing for it. And then I worked a lot with Jane Chapman, who is one of the premier harpsichordists in the UK, and I wrote a bunch of pieces for her, and then which she performed in various places, and then we ended up collaborating on an album called Three Windows with Ian Bellamy, who's a great British sax player. And I wrote the pieces but left room for improvisation. And that's the other interesting thing about the harpsichord, is it has improvisation in its history. So even back in the 1600s and 1700s, that music was in many cases not really written out with any timing. Just the notes were given, and it was up to the harpsichordist to make the music out of. And so, a good harpsichordist and a great harpsichordist like Jane can improvise extremely well within that framework. And you'd listen to it and you think it's a completely composed piece of Baroque music, but actually you look at the page and it's just some chords, and they've made it all. So I found it interesting to combine that kind of improvisation with the more jazzy direction that I and Ian were coming from. And I've just done another album with Jane, which is about to come out in the new year, which I'm pretty excited about, which is with Adriano Adewai, who is a Brazilian percussionist.
Okay.
And so it's mixing Brazilian percussion, and he uses vocals and other instruments with guitar and harpsichord. And again, it's a mixture of composed and improvised. And so.
Wow, that sounds very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm pleased with how it turned out.
Yeah.
Excited about it. So, we've just released a couple of interesting, what I find very interesting, ambient albums under our Tear
or Tear
name. And that's a kind of music that I've done little bits of, and always really, really loved, and just not had the opportunity to do much of. So it's been really great to be able to do some of that, and I'd love to do more of it.
I'm actually super surprised about the response. It's been great.
Yeah.
Really great response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's been really good.
Yeah.
And we have a couple more of those recorded.
Yes.
At least 2 more, I think.
Yes.
And we're going to have to find an opportunity to do some more.
Yeah.
So, the next question is, what's the one thing you wish every musician understood about you before working with them?
I think ultimately it doesn't really matter. I mean, it depends on the situation. Like if you're playing in a situation where there's something specific asked of you, then hopefully, I'm able to deliver that, and it doesn't really. I don't really have to have all my box of tricks open, let's say, to for that kind of job. But then it's kind of nice if people you work with at least have some sort of sense what you're capable of doing, so that you're not running on 10%, let's say, of your engine powers. So that's really why I think some understanding of what the other person does is kind of important. What do you think?
I guess it depends who I'm playing with. A lot of the people I play with sort of already know what I do and where I'm coming from, so it doesn't. But I guess if I was playing, or when I play with somebody that I haven't played with before, especially in an improvised context, I guess it would be that I have certain things that drive me, which are going to be an influence, and if they understand that, it's probably going to be a good idea. One thing is that I am interested in the boundaries of things, like the boundary of tonality, the boundary of, I guess pushing the boundaries of whatever I'm doing in one way or another. It doesn't have to be technically at all. It could be almost, it could be emotionally, or it could be tonally, it could be on any level, but I like to do that. And
what if your musical partner does not understand that or doesn't even want that? I guess that would be then kind of interesting.
It could be interesting. I mean, the problem would be I'd probably end up taking too much of a lead role, because they'd be forced to come back, because I'd be always pushing up. Whereas if they're of a similar mind or willing to take that same role, then we'll both be interacting on the same kind of level rather than me coming up above.
It's interesting because I'm frequently in situations where I clearly know what the parameters are that the other person accepts for to be good for them, like what level of dissonance, let's say, I could use. And it can be frustrating not to be able to kind of go where I want to go, but then within the limitation of the other person's taste, let's say, to deliver something that kind of is beautiful and works and it's deep. That's kind of good too.
It can be, for sure, yeah.
And I mean, something comes to mind, like the session, recording session with Dwicky Damawan that I did, was maybe the most tiring musical experience of my life. It was pushing me to my boundaries in an incredible way. And the result is amazing, but I remember that, at the evening after the recording session, I was completely dead, completely empty, with this fight. And it actually felt as if Dwicky didn't know what I was doing. Not in a bad way. Like it really felt like I was fighting to find my voice within a context of like an ever-changing kind of harmonic flow, and I was using the as you know, you mixed it, right? The my looping setup where things get kind of like more static sometimes, and kind of like finding a way to go in between these, the state of something that's always changing, ever changing, and something static. And that was actually an incredible experience, and that's what just came to mind as a really, really challenging situation that felt as if there was no real understanding, but in a way that also meant basically total trust from everybody in the group. Like I don't even need to know what you do, because I trust you as a person, or as the person that was recommended to me, and that's where Leonardo Pavkovic, I guess, comes in, right, in curating, I'm bringing together these people. That and
the result was amazing. A really unique piece of music. One of the things that I think we have in common, well, we have a lot of things in common, I think, musically, but one of the things is, it seems like you were both willing to, or even have the need sometimes to disrupt in a musical context, to just break everything, or do something unexpected, or do something, I'm almost...
Like an act of aggression somehow, even.
An act of aggression sometimes, or just an act of just complete disassembly, or whatever you want to call it, And I think sometimes that's something that's almost built into my nature. I mean, in certain circumstances, it's just not appropriate. But if I'm if I'm recording an album which is more or less composed because it's got melodies and chord progressions and all that sort of thing, I'm not going to be breaking the whole thing when I play it. But I probably will have something at some point in even the compositional process where that either happens, or it could happen, or I mean, not all the time, but there's an element there for me, and it seems like for you as well.
Yeah, I think it's super important, and just the range of human behavior is like we tend to always think in terms of like, yeah, you got to be peaceful with each other. Okay, yes, and I agree. Of course, we want to be peaceful with each other, but we also have the other side, and just being able to sometimes shout at each other, I think it's important.
I guess,
right?
I never thought of it like that, but that,
even to bring the peace process forward.
Yeah,
you know.
But in a funny way, it is. But then again, it's not. It's not like you're actually shouting at the person. It's like the music is.
Yeah, you're not shouting at the person, of course.
But you are musically, you are, and
yeah.
It's interesting actually. I hadn't thought about it that way, but
when I joined Zentrozone, my band with Bernhard, and now Tobias, but back then with Torsten, another player, he couldn't stand that I was not just playing in D minor all the time. So, and he left. It was really my fault that he left the band. But you know, it's that like sometimes you just have to take the liberties in order to just not get bored.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is for me too. I get bored so easily that I have to keep doing something different. And if the music's getting boring, or not even getting boring, but if it's just reaching a place, I'm talking about in an improvised setting. If it's reaching a place where it feels like it's not really going anything, or it's going anywhere, it's staying in one place, and it's not a place where I feel anything's happening, I'll almost feel that the music needs at that point to be disrupted.
Yes, yeah.
Start again, or move to another direction or something, you know.
You know, I also have this outlet of my my ambient music where just this year at least 3 volumes of ambient music that's very simple, where I would never do that. I would never just, you know, kind of where like when I start, I have this vision, okay, I'm going to use just notes of the E major scale, and that's it. And, you know, sometimes
I mean, it's not always appropriate, is it? I mean, like a lot of the music I do is the same. I can't do that. I wouldn't want to do that. It wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like that impulse is, even when you're improvising in a tonal setting where you're not going to break that, there's almost an impulse to
I mean,
make something happen, change something, make something different happen, take a risk or take a leap or do something, you know.
Yeah.